Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel simply is called Discerning What is True. Today is the third day, January, I think it is, 2026. I was about to say 2023. I'm going to be reading a particular chapter 2 of the book that is called Kabbalah and Genesis. One of the books that I have here is another book by this particular author that I read from probably a month ago. So if you want to hear that, you can. It's simply called Kabbalah, Tradition of Hidden Knowledge. It's by publishers of Thames and Hudson, an oversized book that is. It has artwork in it also. Some of it I don't understand since I'm not a Jewish person. So, but that's cool. That's all right. So let's get to the work here. Again, the title is simply called Kabbalah and Genesis. And then what it's called is simply called Chapter 2, Prologue, Genesis. I also would recommend that you would look into Phil Langdon. Me and Phil Langdon have done quite a few videos in the past. They're still up as far as I know of. And you need to go to his site. Simply is Phil Langdon, who has done far more than I have done. And he's illuminated. I am not. So again, this is chapter 2, Prologue, Genesis. If you want to make a statement, you can, but I prefer you do it after the what I've done here, the reading of the book, because simply as I'm looking at the book on the internet and I'm not actually paying attention to anything else, the questions or anything of that nature here at this time. The initial chapters of the book of Genesis outline the creation of the universe and its inhabitants, including the most complete creature, that is, man. It then describes the forming and division of a third Adam into man and woman, and their fall into matter as they disobey the will of God. So here makes it very clear, right here at first. The fall is them being spiritual. That is Adam, and eventually will be Eve. They fall. They haven't done anything wrong, but they fall in a way from their spiritual world. In other words, we're all spiritual beings. Everyone has a spirit within them, okay? Let's just make that very clear. So they were in the spirit world, and then they're transferred here. This is part of the reincarnation, how it works. And unless you make heaven here within yourself, not heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is impossible, okay? Let's just get let's get this out of the way. People are trying so hard today, trying to make heaven on earth. That is impossible. We have over 8 billion people on this planet. You think that's going to occur? No, that's not going to occur. It's actually an individual thing here. You're not going to make heaven on earth. You're going to make heaven within yourself. That is the process you're looking for. That is what you've been longing for, or if you are involved in this type of study, or as I read this. So let's get this clear, simply. It hasn't been anything that Adam has done wrong. It's a fall. That is, he fell to earth, you see, which is, in reality, a hell. It's the lower world, because the higher world would be the spirit world, or eventually higher than that, if I could make it, would be heaven, which the only person I know who's done what this is about is Phil Langdon. I would appreciate if you would to look into Phil Langdon. His videos are on YouTube. You can watch them. He's done videos by himself. He's done videos with a gentleman here in America. He's done a ton of work. Wrote many books. I bet you he's probably, I'm guessing 10 or 12 in that neighborhood, dealing with all kinds of subjects to do with a gentleman named Steve in Minneapolis, Minnesota, not Minneapolis, but from Minnesota. And from what I've asked him and from others, So the works are there. And if you want to get a book, you can get it from Amazon, but you can also download it on your computer. So there are so many ways. So you have no excuse. If you don't have the money to afford it, fine, no big deal. You don't have to buy, a paperback book, so to speak. All you need to do simply is download it and begin to read it and understand what's going on. So this descent into the lowest of the four worlds was oral tradition, tells us, foreseen and is part of the great plan in which man, image of the divine, descends to the neverlands or never levels of existence in order to experience all the worlds. However, because the gift of free will was still retained by mankind on earth, the human race disobeyed moral law and offset the flow of evolution to such a degree that the divine had to consider canceling the project, despite the fact that the individual, like any ENOCH, had managed to attain the highest level the human spirit can reach and walk with God. Fortunately, Noah retained the allowed to survive the dramatic removal of a corrupt human race by flood, along with the animal and vegetable kingdoms from the lowest world of actions. Noah's level of soul comes in legend, which says that he did not fall asleep during the whole time that the ark was afloat upon the waters, which is a symbolic element of the world of formation. Remember now, these are not real people here, folks. These are just characters, you see. These are names, characters, just like a three-act play, as Phil has shared with me. You start out in the first act introducing of the characters in a play or a movie, that type of thing, or even in a book, you see. When Noah and the preserved creatures with him touched earth, the process of development was began again in the physical world after the divine had promised in the covenant of the rainbow never to take such a drastic action against mankind. However, even Noah was not without fault, as he became drunk with his own wine and fell into a state of disgrace. And that most people don't even talk about that. It's actually in Scripture. He lies with I think it's his daughters, if that's correct. This was a warning that spiritual merit does not place one above the laws of existence, but that on the contrary, more is demanded. One is meant to be example. His place was taken by his son Shem, who carried on the line of spiritual ascent, while the rest of humanity became once more preoccupied with earthly powers and wealth. This was demonstrated by the building of the Tower of Babel with its aim of entering the upper worlds by physical means that can never succeed. So again, these are allegories. It's not realistic. It's just allegories. These are stories to reveal truth. Shem tradition tells us was later to be Jacob's teacher after he had left his father's house. Abraham is the next major figure to continue the line that represented the spearhead of human spirituality. He was after he had realized that the beginning, the beings of the upper worlds were no more than servants of the absolute, told to leave his country and go to a land which the Lord would show him. This journey to the holy country of the Spirit took Abraham through many incidents that tested his faith. Just outside Jerusalem, he was initiated by Melchizedek, that is, the priest of the Most High God, who transmitted to him the secret knowledge given only to those who have proved themselves receptive and obedient to the will of God. This brings us to the point where we can begin to place levels and people under the ladder of trees so as to see the Kabbalistic underlay to the story of human destiny and its characters. If we look at figure 6, which I don't have in front of me, so I'm sorry, we will see that the topmost crown has a divine name associated with it. This is because this title expresses in its full Hebrew, and I'll just spell it to you because I do not know how to pronounce it. EHYEH, Asher, ASHER, EHYEH, or I am that I am. So I am that I am has got to be present tense. You notice that? That's present, not future, not past. The wording there is saying it's in a future. I'm saying it is in a present tense. Divine intention of God, wishing to behold God, that is to unfold down in creation and in return in evolution. God names to right and left are those associated with the merciful and severe aspect of the deity, as are those below on the side pillars. The central column carries the divine nature, or divine names, I should say, related to grace, with the place of God, the Creator, at the head of the world of creation, as well as being at the center of the world of emanation. Just beneath this position is the seventh heaven, where Enoch, who had been transformed into the archangel Metron, Metatron, resides. Below at the foundation and kingdom of the divine world are the God names of living Almighty and Lord, which stand behind the heavenly levels of providence. Adam and Eve occupy the place of wisdom and understanding in the tree of formation that corresponds to the human psyche. They act as the archetypical father and mother to mankind, which just below, in the place of the spiritual foundation, psychological knowledge, is located the figure of Melchizedek, the person, legend says, who has neither father nor mother. This is also traditionally the place where the Holy Spirit speaks to an individual as he emerges from the psyche and into the world of creation. Beneath this is the triad of the soul, which is manifested in the lives and natures of the three patriarchs. Abraham holds the right-hand position of mercy in the triad. Traditionally, he is the man who loved God. This love was tested in the willingness to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. According to legend, Abraham was intensely kind and generous. It was these qualities plus his piety, it is said, that drew God down to approach man and so become the God of earth as well as heaven. Abraham was called the friend of God, and because of this ascetic relationship, God made a covenant with Abraham and promised him not only a son, but that he should be the father of many nations, that is, spiritual traditions. So Isaac, Abraham's son, resides on the opposite pillar in the position of judgment. This place is sometimes called Pedah, or P-E-H-A-D, or fear. This fear is based upon divine justice and its strictness. It has it in brackets saying, as against the merciful pillar, comma. It's based upon the fear he experienced while waiting to be sacrificed and his obedience in submitting to the discipline of Abraham, his father. As a young man, he was very self-controlled, in spite of the hostility of his father's other wife, Hagar, and his rival brother, Ishmael. In later life, the excessive strictness of his outlook manifested in the symbol of blindness, which created a conflict between his sons, because judgment without mercy affects discrimination. Esau, the gruff hunter, was referred to the gentle shepherd, Jacob. Abraham and Isaac balance one another as the merciful and judgmental aspect of the soul. Jacob, whose name means the supplanter, in quotes, usurped the position of Esau and received both the birthright and blessing, the mystical heritage. As the third patriarch, Jacob takes up the central position of the soul triad on the psychological tree. See, people back then understood this all that we have not, we think we've learned something, but reality in the past, they knew about psychology, but they didn't call it that. And I spoke about that yesterday also, because simply is astrology has a lot to do with psychology, you see. You know, it tells why you're here, what is your purpose here, and what date you were born, you see, and what you may experience in your life, such and such. Most of that is in generalities, though, you see. This is because Jacob saw the vision of the ladder stretching between heaven and earth at the place he called Bethel, the house of God, what it means. It's in Genesis chapter 20. Seen in the Kabbalistic ladder that bears his name, this means the place where the physical, psychological, and heavenly trees meet. The two wives of Jacob are said to express the two sides of columns. Leah, the unloved, is on the left, and Rachel, the loved, on the right. So you can see how this is how people get confused with this. This is why when I was a kid or even maybe a teenager saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. How can Jacob have two wives? Okay. Isn't that forbidden or something of that nature? Well, yeah, if you look at it literally, that's what you'll think. That's what you're going to think, literally. But you got to realize it's not a literal. This is not meant to be literal. It's in a way. I'm trying to think of what I want to say. Not psychological. It's hidden, only for a few that will find it. You see, it's not meant for the many. This is what this really bothers me about Christians, because they are. And I was a Christian. I believe this stuff. I believe all this literal stuff. A radical change took place when I was at seminary. I began to see things that were not right. They were not congruent, but I couldn't figure it out. You need a teacher, you see, later on. And I kept pursuing these things, so to speak, not because I'm better than anybody else. I'm not even better than anybody else here. I just simply said, I'm just pursuing this. It's like a goal. You're searching. There's a reason why you're here. In fact, there must be you have to ask yourself this question: why am I here? What is my purpose here? You didn't just come here by accident, folks. You didn't. This is what people don't understand. They think they're here by accident. They don't. There's got to be a purpose in why you are here at this time. Okay, that's what it's about. You just didn't simply flung over here and happenstance to just be born, because you're born on a certain day, in a certain year, because that's how it's been set up for you before you came into what we call fallen. You see, and this is the whole idea with what we call sin. Well, how can you? It's amazing what theology has done to this whole thing. Okay, so when we look at fallen in the Bible, it means you've sinned. I did this question long ago, over 20 years ago, and I said, well, wait a minute. I asked myself this question as a comparison. So, if I was born in a garage, would I become a car? Okay, I know this sounds kind of ludicrous, but the point is, just follow me. In other words, why would I become a sinner just because I'm born here, or just because my mother had me? That doesn't make sense. And reality simply is you are a fallen one, and all that means simply is you come from the spirit world into a physical world. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you are a sinner, although you will sin. That is, you will miss the mark. It means it's like shooting a bow and arrow at a bullseye and missing that mark, not hitting perfection. Well, that's yes. That real simply is you're not perfect. You have to, again, it's a realization of coming, wait a minute, I'm not perfect. So there's a why am I not perfect? And everything that simply is, as John Calvin used to teach, you were born into sin. Your mother and father were. And that's the whole idea with Augustine. He introduces this whole idea simply has to do with, quote unquote, that you're born. Yes, but it's not related in a way. In other words, your daddy and your mama had you, and that's sinful. That's what the connotation comes across with Augustine. That's why you're a sinner. No, that's not true. That is not true. You see how they twisted this. Theologians. And Augustine, as many would say, is brilliant. No, he's not. He just set up a system that has kept mankind lost in a lot of ways. Over 2,000 years now. Now, it's not him. He's roughly in the 400s, so to speak, so 1,600 years, if we have the calendar correct. But you can see how this is a mixed up. You can see how this has all been deception. And that deception in some ways is to make you, quote unquote, think about it and say, why, wait a minute, why was I deceived about this? Why am I being deceived now? What is my, why am I here? You got to ask that question. Why am I here? What is my purpose here? Basic questions. And no one asks these questions. They don't. Oh, I'm here to make, $200,000 a year. I have a job such as this. That's why I go to school. Such as there's nothing wrong with that. It's commendable, but that's not the reason why you're here. That is not your purpose here. But you have forgotten your purpose, you see, because everyone around you, it says, well, you're born a sinner. You're born a sinner because your parents had conception, such and such, and you were born a sinner. But they don't relate it simply as it's because you come to here in flesh, but you're fallen from the spirit world to the physical world. They don't relay that. They don't communicate that. That's how it is misplayed. And so the reality simply is that when your parents have quote unquote sex, it's something bad. You see how they deceive you and all this crap? And how you have to, when you're born in a Christian family of all this stuff, you don't even understand. You believe it because you're a child. You're a child when you're 35, 40 years old. And this is how people stumble. Of course they stumble. They're not being told the truth neither. They're told somewhat the truth, but it's not the truth. It's not 100% true. They deceived you. Your parents don't know anything because simply they just learn what they learned from their parents too. Let me get back where I was at. So the two wives of Jacob are said to express the two side columns. Leah, the unloved, is on the left, and Rachel, the loved, on the right. Perhaps the chief reason for Jacob's center position is his meeting with the angel at Pinnacle. Hold on just a second here. Which means the face of God. Here he rose from the psychological level of the self, which some call, quote, the I, to experience the thou of divine Malkut, or kingdom in the meeting place of knowledge. This meeting is the hallmark of the central pillar down which divinity can manifest directly. The changing of Jacob's name to Israel, or he who struggled with God, end quote, is of esoteric significance as it indicates a transformation of status, a shift of focus from the psychological to the spiritual, and so into direct contact with the divine. Now remember, there's nobody named Jacob. Again, these are characters in a play, as Phil is elaborating with. Together, the three patriarchs compose the emotional triad of the soul. It is here that the covenant with God is executed by the love of mercy, the discrimination of judgment, and the truthfulness of beauty, that is, the self. This triad is the midpoint between the body below and the spirit above. It is a place of consciousness, morality, good and evil, and the zone wherein a person grows into a living, maturing being who can act as channel to what flows down and what rises up between the terrestrial and the celestial. So terrestrial means the earth, celestial means the heaven worlds. Joseph was the first one of the 12 sons of Israel to go down out of Canaan and into Egypt. As Jacob represents the self, so Joseph, with his coat of many colors, represents the multifaceted ego. Dreamer of dreams. Joseph is the screen upon which the psyche exposes itself. So again, these are stories. They're spiritual significance. But, 99 out of 100, actually 100 out of 100 are not going to even see this. They won't understand it unless someone explains it to them, as it's being revealed now, as it was revealed by this gentleman probably nearly 50 years ago. This was done back in the 1980s. This book was published by Shambhala Publishing out of Boulder, Colorado. Interesting, you have the band called Three Dog Night who does this song, Shambhala, which was done probably in the mid-70s, I think, if I recall correctly. So let's get back to Dreamer of Dreams. Joseph is the screen upon which the psyche exposes itself. Talented, adaptable, intelligent, Joseph is symbol of the psychological foundation to the physical crown of the self as expressed by Egypt's great pharaoh. This enlightened king of the natural world honored Joseph and made use of his psychic gifts. Chosen by divine providence to recognize and accept the benefits of a higher world in his country, he invited Jacob and his family to come down from the spiritual country given to the patriarchs under the covenant into Egypt, where they were physically well fed and clothed as any newly born soul and spirit might be. When Jacob died, his remains were returned to the Holy Land to be buried with his fathers. That is, he was taken back up into the world of the spirit. So there's again the revealing. He doesn't go to a Holy Land is heaven. Okay, it's the higher part of who you are. It has nothing to do with a place called Israel. That's another misnomer. That is, he was taken back up into the world of the spirit. When Joseph died, his body was embalmed and kept in Egypt under the promise that his bones should be taken up from there to Canaan, when God would send a deliverer to bring the Israelites up out of Egypt. Thus, the first part of the divine plan that man should descend to the lowest world is symbolized in a family history. The stage is now set for the journey home. In this return, the innocent spirit sent down from the divine, the incarnated, gains experience in each life. That's correct. We gain knowledge, we gain experience when we're here, each time we reincarnate. There is no one and done, folks. That's a lie, a total lie by the church to deceive you. Faith and destiny is evolves back up to the worlds towards divinity. And God is not in a hurry for you to get your act together. That's part of his grace and mercy. Always grace and mercy. There is always that way. That is what reincarnation is. It's about grace and mercy. It is not what the church teaches, which is you going to hell, which is fear. God is not about fear. You've been programmed. See, you've been deceived by people who don't know themselves, who deceive you, and it's based upon what we call not true righteousness. You see, it's called self-righteousness. As every individual, Adam comes to realize that man and the universe are but reflections of the divine. He slowly comes to recognize who is gazing into the mirror of existence at himself. When all the sparks that compose the original Adam, Catman, I should say, experience this reality at the end of time, then the divine face will behold the divine face. Genesis, the book of beginnings, ends its description of the descent with the children of Israel happily sojourning in the land of Egypt, as yet unsuspecting as what would happen to make them seek their way back to the promised land. So again, what he's saying simply is the promised land, if I understand it correctly, is that is heaven. And when they come down to Egypt, which means it's coming down, if you understand that, meaning you're coming down here as a physical being in a physical world, not knowing anything in the spirit world, not knowing nothing of that. You see. And so this whole thing, again, is what we call the tree of life. It's the Lord contact with divinity, and I'm going to try to explain it to you in a different way as he shows. So the main pillar here, not the pillar, but the Lord, we have two sides here. So you have tradition and revelation. So on the right side is revelation, and tradition is the left side. And then we have the Lord above that, Lord contact with divinity. And we got between the two pillars, not pillars, but yeah, there are two pillars, but this part of it is land flowing with milk and honey. That's in between it. Okay, so that means simply there's milk and honey, tradition and revelation. Also right below it is spirit. The next part of it is simply Isaac. On the left, fear of God. Okay, so he's fear, he's respecting God, so to speak. That's the word. In between is called three patriarchs. And then on the other side, the right-hand side, is Abraham, love of God. And now back to the center part. And below that, we have Joseph, Bezroi, which is to the great Pharaoh. Okay. Then we continue on as Joseph's vineyards and to the lesser Pharaoh. Okay. Then we have what we call in between there is simply called animal level. And below that is called the vegetable level. And then we have what we call the part going back, going to the lower part is simply children of Israel in bondage. And below that is the mineral level, or cities of Pithom and Ramses. This is descent. What he's revealing, so this figure is revealing the descent into Egypt, moving down from contact with the divine out of the land of Canaan, or the lower levels of the spirit. The psyche is embodied in the flesh. Here in the bondage of Egypt, the individual soldiers in life is acquiring the experience of the natural world, just like we are today, until way out, which is why it's called an Exodus. Is sought to regain the land promised to the forefathers of the soul. So this is revealing why you're here. We're all in Egypt now, you see. But it's not what the church is teaching as though it's a physical Egypt. It's they've missed the point. Sad part, it really is. And people have been deceived. You see. So that's the end of chapter 2. So I don't want, it's just important that you understand that basically these are metaphors. These are myths. These are children's stories in some ways. They're allegories, but they're trying to reveal what he's showing here, how Kabbalah in the book of the book of Exodus, so to speak, because the whole idea of Exodus is leaving Egypt and going back. And hopefully you made peace and you're now with God. The only person I know who's done that is ascended, which means going upward again. Ascension is to do with Phil Langdon. No one else I know of has done this work at all. So we're going to conclude here. Simply call it Descent into Egypt. And let's see if we can get back over here. So I wanted to reveal this stuff to you guys. It's a very important work. It took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. But I try to elaborate here and try to give you ideas in some ways. What is going on here? Because most people don't understand. In fact, the way the church has taught all this is simply fear. It's all about fear. And that causes problems, you see. So anyway, this is again this is chapter 2. And this is the title is called Kabbalah. And let's see, I might have maybe misprint this thing. I did do wrong. It's supposed to be Kabbalah and Exodus, and I put down Genesis. Sorry for that, guys. That's nothing to do with Genesis. Sometimes I get a little hurried and I make mistakes. So forgive me. All right, take care. Thank you for listening. You have a good evening.